The crystal chandeliers of the Whitmore Grand Hotel lobby blazed with afternoon light, casting geometric shadows across marble floors, polished to a mirror shine. Constance Whitmore walked through the space she had designed herself, but today her steps were not her own. Leon Hale moved beside her, half a step back, his hand resting at the small of her back as if guiding a dance partner. Beneath the pressed wool of his black suit jacket, something cold and hard pressed against her spine. A weapon. Constance knew the rules without being told. No shouting, no running, no reaching for her phone. When she passed the janitor mopping near the concierge desk, she made her move. Her hand dropped to her side, fingers forming shapes in the air between one heartbeat and the next. "Help me. He has a weapon." The janitor's mop stopped mid-stroke, water pooling at his feet. But he did not look up. Silas Henry had learned long ago that invisible people see everything. For 3 years, he had worked the day shift at the Whitmore Grand, pushing his cleaning cart through lobbies and hallways, scrubbing floors that guests crossed without a glance downward. Every surface told him something. The scuff mark near the elevator meant someone had stumbled, probably drunk. The coffee stain by the business center indicated a meeting that had gone poorly. In a world that looked through him, excellence was his only voice. But the real reason Silas noticed everything was Matilda. His daughter was 7 years old, with dark curls that never stayed in their braids and a smile that could light up a room she could not hear. Born deaf, Matilda had taught Silas a different way of seeing the world. When your child cannot hear you call her name, you learn to watch reflections in windows and shadows on walls. Every morning before his shift, Silas dropped Matilda at the special education program 3 blocks from the hotel. They had their own language, a combination of American Sign Language and private gestures families develop over years. A tap on the wrist meant pay attention. A tug on the earlobe meant I love you. A hand over the heart meant you are safe. Other parents sometimes offered pity Silas had never requested. Some made comments about teaching a child with hands instead of words. Silas stopped trying to educate them. Matilda did not need their understanding. She needed a father who showed up, who learned her language, who made the world safe. The morning had started with an unusual request. Silas received his daily assignment from the facilities manager, but today the instructions carried extra weight. The VIP wing needed to be absolutely spotless, and all maintenance staff were told to work quickly and quietly. Do not make eye contact. Do not ask questions. Do not linger. Silas had seen Audrey Finn, the head of security, pacing the lobby more than usual, her hand constantly adjusting the earpiece that connected her to the security network. Bridget Louisa, the senior receptionist whose smile could diffuse angry guests and charm difficult vendors, had pulled Silas aside near the elevators. "We have a special situation today," she said quietly, her eyes flicking toward the executive offices. "Just keep your head down and make sure nothing goes wrong." Constance Whitmore had built an empire on the principle that luxury meant control. The Whitmore Grand was the flagship of a hotel chain that stretched across 12 cities. She had inherited wealth but earned respect, transforming outdated properties into destinations. She understood markets, read quarterly reports like novels, and could spot a failing investment 3 years before collapse. But today, for the first time in her career, Constance was not in control. Leon Hale had approached her that morning in the parking garage, emerging from behind a concrete pillar. He wore an expensive suit, spoke in measured tones, and held a weapon with casual confidence. "We are going to walk into your hotel together," he explained calmly. "You are going to smile at your employees. If you signal security or reach for your phone, people will die." The weapon pressed against her back was a constant reminder. Leon guided her through the lobby, choosing routes with fewer cameras, positioning himself so observers would see a businesswoman and her associate, nothing more. His objective was devastating. In his briefcase was a contract with forged board signatures. If Constance signed, she would transfer controlling interest to a shell corporation. The contract included clauses that would activate immediately, stripping her authority and making her termination inevitable. Leon chose the hotel because here, surrounded by employees and legacy, Constance would maintain appearances. She could not scream in a five-star lobby, but Constance had one advantage Leon had not anticipated. 3 years ago, she had sponsored a program supporting deaf children, funding scholarships and equipment. During the launch, she attended classes, watching teachers and students communicate with their hands, their whole bodies. The experience moved her to enroll in a basic sign language course, learning enough to greet students and understand simple conversations. She never imagined this gesture would become a survival tool. When she passed the janitor near the concierge desk, Constance made a decision in 3 seconds. The man was bent over his mop, but she could see his reflection in the polished floor. More importantly, she recognized him. He always arrived early, brought his daughter to the special school near the hotel, sometimes sat in the break room practicing hand shapes from a sign language manual. If anyone could read her silent cry, it would be him. Her fingers moved with practiced precision. Help me. Gun. Forced contract. Do not look up. She kept walking, her face calm, her breathing steady. Behind her, she heard the soft splash of water hitting tile, the janitor's mop resuming its rhythm. But slower now, more deliberate. Silas felt his heart hammering as he watched the reflection in the marble floor. The CEO had just signed to him. Help me, he has a weapon. His first instinct was to look up, but her final sign was clear. Do not look up. Silas kept mopping, kept breathing. If he shouted for security, Leon might panic and fire. If he ran for help, Constance would be alone with an armed man. If he did nothing, he would carry that weight forever. He had 90 seconds to decide. Silas thought of Matilda, waiting for him after school. He thought of the promise to her dying mother. Keep our daughter safe, come home every night. But he also thought of the promise to himself. Never stand by while someone suffers because intervention feels too dangerous. Silas set down his mop and grabbed the yellow caution sign. He walked toward the VIP elevators, placing the sign directly in Leon and Constance's path. Wet floor. Slippery surface. A small delay, maybe 30 seconds, but enough to reach the supply closet phone without being seen. Leon noticed the caution sign and frowned. He guided Constance toward the secondary hallway, his grip on her arm tightening just slightly. This hotel has excellent maintenance, he commented, his tone suggesting that excellent maintenance should not inconvenience him. Silas moved quickly once they passed. He reached the supply closet and grabbed the phone, dialing the 3-digit extension for security. Audrey Finn answered on the first ring. Maintenance? What do you need? This is Silas Henry from Day Shift, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. I need you to watch the VIP route right now. The CEO is in danger. The man with her has a weapon. Do not approach directly. Silent response only. There was a pause. Then Audrey's voice came back. All business. I am looking at the cameras now. I see them. Are you certain about the weapon? She signed to me, Silas said. Sign language. She told me he has a gun and is forcing her to sign a contract. Another pause. Stay on this line. Do not hang up. Silas heard Audrey speaking rapidly to someone else, her words clipped and professional. Then she came back. I am sending Bridget to create a diversion in the main lobby. I need you to do something for me. Can you move slowly down the VIP hallway and create legitimate reasons for delays? Make it look like routine work. Buy us time to set up a controlled intervention. I can do that, Silas said, and he meant it. For 3 years, he had been invisible in this hotel. Today, invisibility would be his greatest weapon. Years ago, before Matilda was born, Silas had worked in private security, risk assessment for corporate clients. He had been good at it, staying calm under pressure, seeing threats before they materialized. But then his wife got sick. Cancer, fast and cruel. After the funeral, Silas quit. The work required a hardness he no longer possessed. He needed a job that let him be home for Matilda, that did not demand he risk lives. So he became invisible. A janitor, a man who cleaned floors and went home every single night. But the training never left. He still noticed when someone walked with their hand in their pocket at an unnatural angle. He still read exits and sight lines, calculated response times, saw the architecture of violence in movement. That training kept him calm now. Leon was not an amateur. Any confrontation would turn deadly fast. The only path forward was to erode Leon's control slowly, let security respond without triggering a massacre. Silas grabbed his cart and wheeled it down the VIP hallway. He moved at his normal pace, neither hurried nor slow, a janitor doing his job. When he reached the elevator bank, he pressed the service button and then, as if noticing a problem, made a small adjustment to the panel. He did not disable the elevator, but he did activate the maintenance mode, which would require anyone using it to call for assistance first. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but it would force Leon to choose the service stairs or wait for elevator clearance. Either option meant more time. Leon and Constance reached the elevator bank 90 seconds later. Leon pressed the button and frowned when nothing happened. A small sign on the panel indicated temporary maintenance mode. He turned to Constance. "Is this normal?" Constance kept her face neutral. "Sometimes the system glitches." "We can take the service stairs." Leon's eyes narrowed. Something felt wrong to him, though he could not identify what. The hotel was too quiet, too empty in places that should have had more staff. He tightened his grip on the briefcase. Service stairs, now. Silas watched from his position near the housekeeping alcove, his body angled so that he could see their reflections in a decorative mirror without making direct eye contact. When they turned toward the service stairs, he moved again, this time approaching Bridget Louisa at the front desk. Bridget looked up from her computer, her professional smile never wavering even as her eyes communicated urgency. Silas spoke quietly. "He is taking her to the service stairs. Audrey needs to know." Bridget's fingers flew across her keyboard, sending a message through the internal security network. Then she stood, smoothed her jacket, and walked toward the main entrance, where a group of guests had just arrived. Her voice carried across the lobby, warm and welcoming, directing staff to assist with luggage, asking about restaurant reservations, creating a buffer of normalcy that would make Leon think the hotel was functioning as usual. But in the security office, 3 floors below, Audrey Finn was coordinating a response that had nothing to do with normalcy. She pulled up camera feeds from the service stairs, the VIP meeting rooms, and the executive offices. She contacted Ronnie George, the hotel's technology specialist, and asked him to begin logging every camera angle, every timestamp, every piece of evidence that would later prove what was happening. Then she made the hardest call of her career. She contacted the police but told them to stage 3 blocks away. Silent approach, no sirens, no lights. If Leon heard sirens, he would start shooting. Leon pushed open the service stairwell door and gestured for Constance to enter first. The stairwell was concrete and utilitarian, a stark contrast to the marble and crystal of the guest areas. As they climbed, Leon spoke for the first time in several minutes. "I had hoped we could do this in a civilized manner. Walk into a nice office, sign some papers, part as business associates. But your hotel seems determined to create complications." Constance kept climbing, her heels clicking against concrete. "I do not control elevator maintenance schedules." "No," Leon agreed. But you do control a great deal else, which is why this contract is necessary. You have built something impressive, Miss Whitmore. Unfortunately, you built it on a foundation my associates now own. The debt your grandfather incurred 30 years ago, the leveraged buyouts your father executed, the properties mortgaged and remortgaged, it all comes due eventually. We are simply here to collect. They reached the VIP floor, and Leon directed Constance down a hallway toward a small conference room. The room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. On the table sat a leather portfolio Leon had arranged there earlier that morning. Inside was the contract, already prepared, already witnessed by forged signatures. All it needed was Constance's name. Leon closed the door and gestured to a chair. "Please sit. Review the contract if you wish, though the terms are non-negotiable. You sign, you walk out with your life and reputation. You refuse, and the story becomes much darker." Constance sat slowly, pulling the portfolio toward her. She began reading, not because she intended to sign, but because every minute was another minute for help to arrive. Her hands trembled as she turned pages, but her voice stayed steady. "This will take time. There are 12 pages of clauses. Take your time," Leon said, his hand inside his jacket, fingers on the weapon. But not too much time. Outside in the hallway, Silas moved with careful precision. He had watched Leon and Constance enter the conference room, had seen the door close, had noted the way Leon positioned himself between Constance and the exit. Silas could not enter the room without triggering violence, but he could control what happened outside it. He used his cleaning cart to partially block the hallway, creating a barrier that would slow anyone trying to leave quickly. Then he knelt beside an electrical outlet and removed the cover plate, as if checking for a wiring problem. To anyone watching the security cameras, he was a maintenance worker, doing routine tasks. To Audrey Finn, watching from 3 floors below, he was marking his position and indicating he was ready. Audrey's voice came through the radio, clipped to Silas's belt, quiet enough that only he could hear. "We have officers staged at the north and south stairwells. Ronnie is recording everything. When I give the signal, I need you to create a distraction in the hallway. Something that makes noise but does not seem like an attack. Can you do that?" Silas pressed the button on his radio twice. 2 clicks meant yes. Inside the conference room, Constance was running out of pages to read. She had stretched the review as long as possible, but now she was on the final page, and Leon was no longer willing to wait. "Enough," he said, pulling a pen from his pocket. "Sign the document, Miss Whitmore. Sign it now." Constance picked up the pen. She needed a third option, something unexpected. She set the pen on the signature line but did not write. Instead, she looked at Leon directly. "Before I sign, answer one question. How did you know about my grandfather's debt? That information was sealed 40 years ago." Leon smiled. "That is the beauty of patience. Information does not disappear. I have been planning this for 3 years. Every document, every secret your family buried, I found it all." His words were a confession, and Constance understood Leon was not working alone. There was inside help. If there was inside help, there would be evidence, and evidence meant this could be fought in courts. She picked up the pen again, positioning her hand so her fingers could form shapes beneath the table where Leon could not see. "Help! Now!" Close. In the hallway, Silas saw the sign through the glass panel. He stood, grabbed a metal tool tray, and dropped it. The clatter was enormous. Leon's head snapped toward the door. Silas knelt slowly, began gathering tools, muttering apologies. The distraction lasted 5 seconds, but 5 seconds was enough. Audrey Finn and 2 police officers appeared at the hallway's end, moving silently. They positioned themselves on either side of the door. Audrey held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. She opened the door. Leon spun toward the sound, his hand emerging with the weapon visible. But before he could aim, Constance moved. She had been watching Silas through the glass, watching his hand signals. When Audrey opened the door, Silas signed one word: down. Constance dropped beneath the table as Leon's attention split. Audrey and the officers rushed forward, weapons drawn, voices shouting. Leon grabbed for Constance but caught air. He swung toward the officers. Then Silas stepped into the doorway and signed again. Constance could see him from beneath the table. The signs were for Matilda, the private language of father and daughter. You are safe. It is over. Come home. Leon turned again, trying to track too many threats, and his control shattered. He raised the weapon. Officers shouted. Then Ronnie George, monitoring every camera, cut the conference room lights remotely. In 3 seconds of darkness, officers wearing night vision moved with efficiency. When the lights came back, Leon was on the floor, weapon secured, hands restrained. He shouted about lawyers and lawsuits, but no one listened. Audrey was reading him his rights while Ronnie's camera footage played on her tablet, showing every moment from parking garage to conference room, a complete record of kidnapping and extortion. The arrest took 17 minutes. Leon was escorted out through the service entrance. Constance gave her statement in her office, her voice steady though her hands trembled. When the detective asked how she signaled for help, she explained about sign language, about Silas, about reflections in marble floors. The detective promised to commend the maintenance worker, but commendations were not what Constance thought about as she sat alone in her office an hour later. She was thinking about how close she had come to dying in a building she owned, surrounded by systems she had built. And she was thinking about how the person who saved her was someone she had never spoken to, whose name she learned only that afternoon, who had been invisible until she desperately needed him to see. Elias Corbin, the district attorney, arrived the next morning with preliminary findings. Leon Hale was not working alone. He had been funded by a shell corporation with organized crime ties, and he had inside help from someone in the Whitmore organization. That person provided access codes, security schedules, and confidential family financial records. The investigation was ongoing, but arrests were coming. Constance listened with calm that surprised her. She had spent her career building walls, creating systems and hierarchies that kept her separate from her employees. She had believed separation meant safety, that control meant security. Leon Hale had proven her wrong brutally. She thanked Elias for his work and promised full cooperation with the investigation. Then she asked him to leave. She had something else to do. Silas was cleaning the 3rd floor when Bridget found him. The CEO would like to see you in her office. Silas followed her to the executive level, walking on carpet so thick his footsteps made no sound. He had been here before, but only to empty trash after hours. Now, in daylight, the space felt foreign. Constance stood when he entered. She gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I need to speak with you. Silas sat carefully, aware his uniform was still damp from mopping. Constance sat across from him, looking at him as if trying to understand how a janitor had become the most important person in her building. I need to thank you, she said, and apologize. You saved my life, and I never even knew your name. You worked here 3 years, and I never once acknowledged your existence. That is unacceptable. Silas had not saved her for recognition. He had saved her because it was right, because he could not live with doing nothing, because his daughter was waiting for him to come home. Constance continued. The police tell me you learned sign language for your daughter, that she is deaf. Is that correct? Yes, Silas said quietly. Yesterday, when I signed to you, you understood immediately. You did not hesitate. You needed help, Silas said. There was not time for hesitation. Constance nodded slowly. I have been thinking about what happened, about what it means. Yesterday I learned that power is an illusion. The person with the most control was not the CEO or the man with the weapon. It was the janitor who nobody noticed, who saw what others missed, who acted when action mattered. She walked to the window. I am going to make changes to this organization. Better security, better support for frontline employees. But more than that, I want to create a fund to support families with children who have disabilities, scholarships, therapy, equipment. I would like to name it in honor of your daughter. Silas felt something crack open in his chest. You do not need to do that. I know, Constance said. I want to. Because you learned her language, you were able to help someone who desperately needed it. That deserves to be honored. She returned to her desk. I also want to offer you a different position, Director of Employee Safety and Wellness. You would oversee programs to ensure every worker has the resources and support they need. The salary is substantially higher, and the schedule is flexible for your daughter. Silas stared. I am a janitor. I do not have a college degree. You have something better, Constance said. The ability to see invisible people. The courage to act when others freeze. The lived experience of being overlooked. This organization needs someone who understands what that feels like, because that is how we build systems that actually protect people. Silas thought about Matilda, about medical bills, about the cramped apartment, about the future he wanted for his daughter. He thought about real change requiring people who understood what needed changing, not from textbooks, but from living it. I accept, he said. 3 months later, on a cold afternoon in early spring, Constance stood in the lobby of the Whitmore Grand as a new plaque was unveiled near the main entrance. The plaque listed emergency protocols, including a silent alert system allowing any employee to signal danger without speaking. The system had been designed by Silas, implemented by Audrey, and funded by the Matilda Henry Foundation for Children with Disabilities. Matilda was there, holding her father's hand, watching with curious eyes as people gathered. She did not fully understand what was happening, but she understood her father was being honored, and that made her smile with fierce pride. Constance approached them and signed carefully. Your father is a hero. Matilda's eyes widened. She looked at Silas, who nodded. Then Matilda signed back. I know, he is my dad. Later, after the ceremony ended, Constance found herself alone with Silas near the concierge desk where everything had begun. The marble floor still gleamed, still reflected everything. But now, when Constance looked down, she saw not just her reflection, but Silas standing beside her, equal and necessary. I never thanked you properly, she said. Silas shook his head. You thanked me with action. The fund, the job, the safety protocols, those things will help people long after I am gone. Still, Constance said, and then she signed instead of speaking. Thank you. You saved my life. You changed everything. Silas signed back. You gave me a chance to matter. That gift goes both ways. Matilda ran across the lobby and grabbed her father's hand, pulling him toward the exit. Silas waved to Constance and let himself be led away, his daughter's laughter a sound he could not hear but could feel in her bouncing steps. Constance watched them go, and for the first time in years she felt hope, not calculated hope of quarterly earnings, but raw hope that came from knowing you had been wrong about everything and choosing to be right going forward. She returned to her office and sat at her desk, looking over the city. Somewhere in that city, Leon Hale sat in a jail cell awaiting trial. Somewhere, his accomplice, a senior vice president who had sold out the company, had been arrested. And somewhere, a 7-year-old girl who could not hear was teaching her father new signs, new ways of seeing the world. Constance picked up her phone and called the foundation office. I want to expand our reach, not just children with disabilities. Every family that struggles, every parent working 2 jobs, every person who feels invisible. I want them to know they matter. Find me the programs that do that work." The director promised to compile a list. Constance ended the call and walked to the window, watching the sun set over buildings where millions lived invisible lives. For so long, she had believed success meant rising above them. Now she understood it meant reaching down, pulling others up, building systems that recognized everyone's humanity. She thought about Silas, mopping floors in a building she owned, seeing danger in a reflection. She thought about Matilda, laughing with her whole heart. She thought about the contract she had nearly signed, the empire nearly lost, the life saved by a janitor who refused to look away. The city darkened as night fell, lights coming on in windows across the skyline. Constance pressed her hand against the glass and made a promise. She would not forget. She would not return to the comfortable distance that separated CEOs from the people who cleaned their offices. She would not let the fear fade and the lessons disappear. She had been given a second chance, pulled back from darkness by hands that signed instead of shouted, by courage that required no audience, by a father's love teaching him to see what others missed. That chance came with responsibility, to honor it, to learn from it, to become the kind of leader who understood that real power was not control over others, but creating conditions where everyone could thrive. Constance turned from the window and sat at her computer. She had work to do, systems to build, policies to write, futures to shape. But for the first time in her career, the work felt less like conquest and more like service, less like climbing and more like building, less like proving worth and more like recognizing everyone else's. In the lobby far below, the night shift janitor began his rounds. He walked the same hallways Silas had walked, pushed the same cart, mopped the same floors. But now when he worked knowing his labor was seen, his presence acknowledged, his humanity recognized. The marble gleamed beneath his mop, reflecting his image back to him, and he smiled at what he saw. A person who mattered, a worker with dignity, a human being whose value was not measured by title or paycheck, but by the simple truth that he showed up, did his job, and deserved respect for both. That was the legacy of a terrifying afternoon when a CEO signed for help and a janitor refused to look away. Not just a life saved, but a system changed. Not just a criminal caught, but a foundation built. Not just gratitude expressed, but dignity restored. The hotel lights blazed against the darkness, a beacon of warmth in the cold night. Inside, people worked and rested, lived their invisible lives with quiet knowledge that today someone was watching. Someone cared. Someone understood that every person deserved to be seen. And in a small apartment across the city, Silas Henry sat on the floor with his daughter, teaching her new signs and learning from her the ancient language of love that required no sound. They signed about their day, about the ceremony, about the future. And when Matilda finally drifted to sleep, her hands still moving in dream conversations, Silas covered her with a blanket and sat watching her breathe. He had saved a life. But more than that, he had proven something he had always believed. That kindness was not weakness. That attention to the overlooked was not wasted energy. That learning someone else's language was not a burden, but a gift. The city slept around them, millions of hearts beating in the darkness, each carrying its own invisible stories. And in a hotel lobby across town, a plaque on the wall reminded everyone who entered that silence could be a cry for help, and attention could save a life, and the people you do not notice might be the ones who notice everything. That was the lesson. That was the gift. That was the story that would be told for years, in boardrooms and break rooms, in sign language and spoken words, in quiet moments when people chose to see instead of overlook, to act instead of ignore, to become the kind of human beings who made the world safer simply by refusing to look away. The Whitmore Grand Hotel stood tall against the night sky, its windows glowing with life, its future unfolding one careful, conscious decision at a time. And somewhere in that building, a marble floor reflected everything, holding the memory of the day when reflection became revelation, when a signal became salvation, when invisible became essential. The story ended there, but the legacy continued. In scholarships funded and lives changed, in protocols written and dignity restored, in a 7-year-old girl growing up knowing her father was a hero, in a CEO learning that power meant nothing without humanity, in a city full of invisible people who were finally, blessedly seen.